Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, our guest is Chris Lodwig from Seattle, Washington by Skype with his newest release, Systemic. And if you love those ones where computers are taking over the world, you're going to love this. It's not actually what happens, but it's pretty cool. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm great.
Oh, this was a great story. I love the way you spun it so that the owl was actually nice and willing to take the fall in a couple of areas. But it was really crazy how we all got there. So how did you come up with this community? Why did you leave? And it was really scary in a way because it could have been true to life because of COVID and just that whole indifference and that eerie quiet on the streets and different sections. It was just like...
Yeah. So a lot of the structure of the book and the background of the book, as you said, there's a global AI, and it's taken over the world rather benevolently. It's not like one of those stories where the artificial intelligence like sneaks in and takes over the world, but it's there to help humanity solve all of our problems, and that goes a little bit sideways. So any problem that any human will present to this machine, it does a very, very good job at looking at the complexity of that problem and coming up with solutions for it. And so one of the things that was happening in this story, and that sparseness that you're talking about, that lack of population, did have to do with somebody saying at some point, there sure are a lot of people. We should really reduce the overall population. And it did, and it did it very effectively. And again, benevolently, it didn't try to, there wasn't mass exterminations or anything creepy like that, like we usually hear about. It very slowly, over a consistent period of time, found ways to reduce the population. But the end result of that was that the cities or the population centers contracted quite a bit. So they still have their core, but all in the outlying areas just became these sort of wastelands because nobody was there to fill them. And the large buildings, I imagine, people, an entire floor of a building might have one person on it just because it was so sparse, so sparsely populated. And that was where just thinking what it would be like in a world like that is where that all came from.
I like going camping and, getting supply drops, things like that. That was really cool. But then I'm like, wow, that whole Google world thing is kind of intimidating now. But it just means you really question a lot of things that were going on in society today as you race through it to find out if everybody was going to be okay. And what a killer ending. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you.
Good twist.
Yeah, it's fun. So in this particular book, I was discovery writing. I'm sure people know what that means, which is, as I was writing it, I got to it felt like reading it, right? Because I'm writing it and I'm thinking as I go, what's going to happen? I just got to follow my own curiosity. So one of my favorite things about the major twist in the book, and this is 100% true, I did not know that was going to happen until I wrote it. And I went, oh, that's fun. I'll do that. And so if it has that sort of real surprising feel to it, it's because I was literally completely surprised when I wrote that. And the way that the book is structured with the alternate timelines and how that twist and that wove together, I didn't have any idea that was really going to happen. It was something that just kind of popped into my head one day, and I had that moment. So it was really fun to write as well. I'm glad you enjoyed reading it.
I did. It was, I can't think of what it was similar to, but it was that state of mind. Like, is this real? Is this my real reality? Or was that my real reality? All those things about finding out who you were, what experiences you had, that was really scary.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time obsessing about sort of the mind and how we construct reality for ourselves and so that was a huge part of obviously what was behind the book is what motivates people to do the things they do. How much do our memories impact who we are and who we become? And so that I was definitely playing a lot with those sorts of things. A lot of Philip K. Dick novel kind of worked their way into that. You can just think of them. Total Recall, where it's like, what's the real, and what's not real, and how does it get implanted, and what does it make you do? And I've always found that sort of reality bending to be extremely enjoyable. And I really liked the way that all of that played in with the AI and what it could or couldn't do for humanity. So that's where I was going with that. So
it was really well developed storyline with the AI. What about the name of the book? Why did you choose that?
Systemic. So part of it was laziness. And what I mean by that is I had a working title for the book. And it felt very sci-fi, which I'm like, hey, that's cool. It's a sci-fi sounding name, Systemic. But there's going to be 100,000 books called Systemic out there, so it'll just be my working title. And when I came to publish it, I looked out and I found that really there actually wasn't any books named Systemic, and so that was beneficial. But how it became the working title of the book, I'll explain that. The AI that you referred to, the global AI, they call it the system. It was called the system when it was under development. And so when it broke free and went out into the world, it kept its name. That's what everyone called it. So it said, I'm the system, which sounds kind of generic, but working in technology, we actually call our systems all the time. And so it kind of misconstrued the fact that it was just called a system to its name was the system. And so that's how it introduced itself to the world. And one of the things that this AI does extremely well is parse truth. And so people would come to it online and say, hey, I read this news story or I heard this thing. And it would quickly do some calculations, do some searches and say, yeah, that's not true. Sort of like Snopes or one of those fact-checking websites they have, but it would do it, instantaneously and then verify it. So over time, the word systemic in society came to mean truthful or valid. And so it's sort of a way of saying that the book is valid or it has truthfulness built into it, because that is such a large part of the book, both what is true to the individuals and what is true within the world. And that's the systemic aspect of it. And that's where the book title came from. So when I got to keep the title, I was extremely happy. So
that's great. So your background is in technology?
Yes. And my professional background is in technology, which is to me, my educational background is in very, very liberal arts. I studied something called comparative history of ideas, and philosophy majors go, whew, that's pretty liberal. So I was definitely out there in the I had to take a lot of philosophy, anthropology, world religions, history classes. That's basically what I did in college. And I was fortunate that as soon as I graduated, I could either go work at an espresso bar or Microsoft. And I got lucky that Microsoft took me and I didn't spend the rest of my career doing something that would have been less beneficial to me. So.
Oh, that's great. So when do you have time to write?
Well, before the pandemic, I used to write on the bus. So I commute to work. In fact, Systemic, the book, actually started with me writing on the bus and my phone running out of battery, so I couldn't, check Facebook, and my laptop died. And so I started writing by hand, and suddenly I had a book. So I do almost all of my writing in the mornings and in the evenings during my commute. Of course, now I don't commute because no one goes to work anymore. I've been now working from home for a year. In a week, I'll have been working from home for a year now. And so I have to get up very early in the morning and write. And that's when I do it until I got a puppy last week. And now I have no idea what I'm going to write because in the morning I have to keep an eye on the puppy. So
that's funny. How do you like working how do you like working at home in general?
It's a mixed thing, really. I love being home with my family. I love being home with my pets, and I like being in my space. I like my home, and so that's great. We're still working extremely hard at work, and so we're being very successful in doing that. I just had a major product release yesterday, and we still managed to do all the work on time. We've done 2 releases at my job on time. So we've been very successful. I miss my work friends terribly. I really wish I could go to a meeting. There's something very special about being able to get on a whiteboard with your fellow employees and hash things out and have coffee and talk to them face to face that you just don't get over Skype or what have you.
Yeah.
So I miss that. But overall, I give it a B. Yeah.
That's funny. All right. So one thing in the story that rang true to the whole COVID thing is that, everything seems perfect because, when you go for a walk, if you do like your fake commute, you see that everything's quiet, everybody's tucked away.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody's so miserable. And when you see people in the stores, you can see how miserable some of them are, especially grocery shopping. So it really like made you like stop and think about everything going around you because of the book and the similarities. It was so creepy. And then you took us into the wilderness, and I'm like, maybe you should do that.
You should do that?
Yeah.
Go to the wilderness?
Go to the wilderness. But how did you take that twist, and why did you bring us through the wilderness to a really small town?
So first off, as I said, I Discovery wrote the book, and the first thing that popped into my mind actually on the bus when my laptop and phone died was Erin, who's one of the female protagonists of the story, hiking through the Prower Valley. And so that was the thing. And I'm like, oh, where's she going? What's she doing? Why does she want to go home? And so it actually started out in the open high west of the United States. That's kind of where it just was set. And I pretty quickly fell in love with the idea of having a sci-fi book that wasn't in a city. Most sci-fi, and this is sort of a cyberpunky kind of book in a way. They all take place in New Tokyo or something like that, some megalopolis. And I thought to myself, the future comes to small towns too. What's it like to hike in the future? What are first aid kits like in the future? Like I really wanted to get down to that and talk about things that don't change. So for example, there's all these small town diners that they go to, or little pizza places or whatever, these tiny little towns. There's not very many people in them because everything's very depopulated, but they still have burger joints and they still have beer. Like those things don't go away, though the ketchup is Rishi's curried ketchup. Like things have definitely worked their way in. They're having, tandoori instead of barbecue back in these barbecue joints and things like that. But the restaurants are still there. The cars are the same that they'd have in the city, just like it is today. And I just thought that was a fun way of exploring the future and thinking to myself, why wouldn't the fate of all the world rest in a small town in rural America? It's not really America, but yeah. You get it. So it was just, I was interested in it.
Have you ever traveled to a small town that you particularly liked in America?
All of them and none of them. In a way, like there's something that is very wonderful about small towns, and just the way that they're set up. They also have, to me, sort of a very lonely feeling as well, but also a closeness. So it's a really interesting contrast. So for instance, you'll go into a small town and there'll be a cafe and everybody there knows each other. It's very familial and very close knit. But then when they go to work, they'll be on a tractor that's, 3 miles from anybody. So it's very spaced out and very, what I consider to be very lonely because I work very closely with people. And so that contrast I find very interesting, very close knit, very sparsely separated. And I don't know, I just think that's interesting. And I've been to plenty of small towns in the United States and other places around the world. So.
That's great. What about hiking? Where are your favorite places to hike?
I live in Washington State, so there isn't a place in Washington State that you don't like hiking. It's a beautiful place. There's all the Cascades are wonderful. My wife and I will go snowshoeing. I hike a lot because I fly fish. So any place there's a river is a place I want to go hiking. And out on the Olympic Peninsula, there's very large parks out there. But we've also gone up into Alaska. We've gone to New Zealand and places like that, and we do hiking and things like that. I'm not a huge hiker. I did when I was younger. Mostly, I just wanted to have Erin, who's again in the book, have that sense of isolation that I've felt when I'm hiking. Her alone in the wilderness felt very poignant to me, and I liked the idea of what it meant for her to be alone out in the wilderness. So.
It was great. I love the way that she's inquisitive. She likes discovering nature or things in nature, animals, protecting them. I loved how all the gear was so much easier to use than I recall it when I'm hiking. The new technology, I was like, oh, it's got to come.
Yeah, I have friends who, like my friend who I work with, who read the book. She's one of my early readers, and she's like, "Oh my God, the hiking gear! Oh, it's so amazing! I love it. The self-drying socks, the auto-collapsing origami tents, and all that." She was like, "I love the hiking gear." So
I know, but I could just imagine that it would be real. So you have to develop that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that whole part was cool. It was really believable how she met the older man when she needed assistance and got sick. And the water, the straws to purify the water. That was really key.
Those exist, by the way. I have one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the filter straws, they're awesome. They're like really highly filtrative things, and you just stick them in the water, you drink right out of them. They're great. They're called life straws or filter straws. Yeah, they're a thing.
Oh, cool.
I didn't make that one up.
All right. So now I'm going to have to go buy one. That's wicked.
Yeah, they're cheap too. They're like $19. They're great.
Oh, that is amazing. And it really does filter the water?
Yeah, they're great.
Well, see, I loved all the little hints about futuristic stuff like that throughout the book. You're so creative.
Thank you.
It was so much fun to read too. I couldn't put it down. And I like that the chapters were done in such a way that they weren't excessively long. You gave me like room to take a break, get some coffee. Because sometimes when they're longer, you feel like you have to keep going or you're going to miss something.
Yeah. I try to put those, 3 dots every once in a while to break up the paragraph so you can.
That was really helpful too.
My wife and I read to each other at night. That's part of our ritual. And yeah, I realize how important it is to have sort of short things that you could give your readers opportunities to take breaks. So
absolutely. So how did you come up with his character? He's really kind of key to everything that goes on, but he comes in such a soft way.
So when you say he, there's actually
so the older man that owns the cabin.
Thomas. Yeah. How did he come in? Well, again, I was discovery writing, and so a lot of the answer is going to be he just showed up, and just in the nick of time. Thank God, that's kind of what he was.
But on the flip side, even if you're discovery writing, when you go back and you read it, doesn't it remind you of some place that you've been? Like, where would you get those ideas from? Or somebody you've met even?
Well, so everybody's an amalgamation of a lot of different people. I had what as far as creating the characters, I had an idea in my mind, and I kind of creeped around on the internet looking for headshots of people, and so I had somebody in mind when I did him, and he kind of reminded me a little bit of my best friend in high school's dad. He was kind of this wise guy with a beard who likes to sit around and drink whiskey and read books, and so he was a little bit based on that guy, um, but mostly what he was Aaron wanted to go home. And she had this idealized idea of what it would be like to be home in Prower. And you know, that idealized idea of home isn't exactly what you might hope. And so what Thomas was really originally doing was being what I would call a real home. In other words, it was there's this part where he gives her a blanket, he gives her some water and some toast. Like he is in fact mothering her, and she's trying to get back to her mother. And so it's more like, people say, friends are the family that you choose. It was kind of a theory, kind of like that. Like home is right here where this person who's a stranger is actually caring for you. And that's kind of how he originally started, was just as a contrast between what her idealized idea of home is and what an actual idea of home is. And then I thought of all those things that mean a lot to me personally when I think about my childhood and the smells and the toast and the water by the bed. And when I've been sick, and my mom would take care of me, what did it feel like? And how wonderful it is. Have you ever traveled another country and you meet somebody who just takes you in, and how wonderful that feels? Like, so it was all of that was really what Thomas's job was. And then of course he developed to be an extremely important character. Originally he was just sort of ancillary and the guy who saved her from dying in the wilderness. And then he became a massive part of the story. So he exploded from there. And he has a dog. So, that's cool.
Yeah. I know. And then the computer technology type guy that
Lem.
came in. Yeah, it was really like, oh, what is he going to do? Like, you're like, oh, no, he should. There are points where you're like, yep, he should definitely do it. And then you're like, oh, wait, maybe he shouldn't. And then.
Yeah, I always talked about him, Lem, I say, is my perpetual downward spiral of bad decisions. Like he means well, kind of, but he's just kind of short-sighted and he makes really poor decisions. And I love him. Like I have so much sympathy for him, but he really makes bad decisions. So
I know. I thought it was great the way it all played out, though. It was so much fun to read. And I loved his computer.
Arleigh?
Yeah, she was
AI.
cute. She was more like a girl, right?
Yeah, I mean the AIs, that's the sub AIs. They're like a really really intense version of like an Alexa or something like that. And so they everybody has their own AI, but Arleigh is his, and it is a sort of a feminine AI, and she plays an outsized role for an AI in the story. She's definitely, I like to think of her as a little devil on the shoulder, whispering ideas to Lem and kind of pushing him in directions that he probably wouldn't have done otherwise. She's a bad influence.
I know, but I love the use of technology, the way that it was explained, kind of like white hat, black hat.
Yeah.
That's a gray area. It's okay.
Yeah.
You can do that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of gray area. I believe heavily in gray areas. And I think that's where the fun of story writing is, and character development in particular is, everything seems like a good decision to the person making it. Definitely. It's kind of like, that's kind of how I look at the world. And if you're writing a story and a character and somebody's making a decision that just makes them seem like, say, a jerk, like, wow, what a jerk. Oh, that guy's a bad guy. Like, that's not very interesting. I like to go, yeah, he's going to make some bad choices because he thinks it's the right thing to do. He's wrong, but he has a reason for doing the things that he's doing. So
real quick, is this your first book? Or have you written a
It,
lot before?
it's my first published novel. I wrote a really bad novel in college that never saw the light of day because it was quite bad. Um, but I hadn't written for, I don't know, 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I really hadn't written a word in 20 years. And this thing just, I say, it fell out of my brain. Like I just, at least the first draft of it, just came out of my mind in 9 months from I saw a girl standing on a rock in a valley to having what is it, like 520-page sci-fi novel in 9 months. Uh, and I should say that it actually took me years of going back and editing. I was a meticulous editor, and I worked with many, many rounds with editors and various editors and beta readers. Like I really worked at it. But the original draft and the idea of it and just came very, very easily after maybe just sitting there for 25 years waiting to come out. So
Seriously?
seriously,
Wow. It is so well done. I'm so impressed. So how many
thank you.
more will be in the series?
Uh, I think two. Right now, I'm on the second one, and at some point, I'm 120,000 words into the second one, which is about the same size as that, and I've got quite a bit more to do on it. So that's going to be a little bit of a thicker book. At some point, it was this very, very epic story that kind of split in half, and so I know it's at least two stories that are coming.
Oh,
So.
good. Good, because I think your fans are going to be just like waiting for the next one. When do you think the second one will be out?
It depends on if COVID ever goes away. I only get to write about half as often as I used to. And then with the puppy, it's even less. So I get about a quarter of the writing I'm supposed to. So
How
it's
does
going to
that
be,
happen when you're right at home and you don't have to go out, walk to the bus, and it should give you more time?
yeah, you'd think so. But when you're walking to the bus, you're thinking. When I walk to the bus, sometimes I type on my phone as I'm walking. Then I have a 45-minute long commute where there's nobody interrupting me. And I get to sit at work in the mornings and drink coffee with nobody interrupting me and write. So actually, my commute and my work is where I get the majority of my writing done. Here, I go downstairs, then it's breakfast time, and then I got to take the dog out, and then I've got to, you know, not take the bus. And then in the evenings, my kid wants to see me. So it's just, I just don't have any segments in my life where I can write. So it makes it harder.
Wow. Well, we hope you get it done quick. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep asking questions. And if you love technology, sci-fi, and wicked twists, Chris Lodwig with Systemic is definitely something that'll keep you tuned in to the very last page.